This is Chapter 12, Protection Mechanisms. The learning outcomes include: describe the various access control approaches, including authentication, authorization, and biometric access controls. Identify the various types of firewalls and the common approaches to firewall implementation. Identify and describe the types of intrusion detection and prevention systems and the strategies on which they are based. And explain cryptography and the encryption process, and compare and contrast symmetric and asymmetric encryption. Section 1, Introduction to Protection Mechanisms. The learning outcome for this section include: describe the various access control approaches, including authentication, authorization, and biometric access controls. Here is a compelling quote by Bruce Schneier, who is a security consultant. "If you think technology can solve your security problems, then you don't understand the problems and you don't understand the technology." You don't want to be that person. Technical controls alone cannot secure an IT environment, but they are an essential part of the overall information security program. Managing the development and use of technical controls requires some knowledge and familiarity with the technology that enables them. Technical and business skills are also needed. Technical controls can enable policy enforcement where human behavior is difficult to regulate. In other words, it's easier to develop a control that keeps people from accessing information they should not than it is to watch and influence human behavior in the absence of controls. Information is under attack by a variety of sources. On the people side, protection controls include security planning. A good plan in place is essential to securing the information assets of the organization, including incident response. Organizations must plan how to respond to an incident. Disaster recovery must have a plan of how to recover when an incident is classified as a disaster. And finally, business continuity. The organization must have a plan to keep the most important operations up and running at an alternate site until InfoSec can recover normal operations at the main site. These plans serve as protected controls to mitigate the impact and likelihood of an unexpected adverse event. A properly educated system of users who are well prepared for potential threats can minimize the impact when information is under attack by people. On the left-hand side, technical controls can provide some protection from attack through technology, including redundancy, backup servers, or redundant array of independent disks, RAID, or off-site real-time backups may minimize the impact of technical attacks. Monitoring video cameras or software that tracks user activity, for instance. Patches. Stay updated with latest patches and maintenance so that you can respond to current threats. Intrusion detection. Alerts whenever someone tries to get into your system. Encryption at both ends to protect message and text, for instance. Backups. On-site or off-site, real-time or delayed, tape backups, cloud computing, etc. These technology controls can help to protect when your organization is under a technical attack. Access controls regulate the admission of users into trusted areas of the organization, both logical access to information systems and physical access to the organization's facilities. Successful access control encompasses all four of the following processes: obtaining the identity of the entity requesting access to a logical or physical area. This is identification. Confirming the identity of the entity seeking access to a logical or physical area. This is authentication. Determining what all actions that entity can perform in that physical or logical area. That's authorization. And documenting the activities of the authorized individual and systems, which is accountability. All those together give successful access control. There are 3 types of authentication mechanisms. Something a person knows, for example, a password or passphrase. Something a person has, for example, a cryptographic token or smart card. And something a person can produce, such as fingerprints, palm prints, hand topography, hand geometry, retina and iris scans, face scans, or a voice or signature that is analyzed using pattern recognition. These characteristics can be assessed through the use of biometrics. Do you use your fingerprint to log into your iPhone? Then you've already been using biometrics. We start with something a person knows. The authentication mechanism verifies the user's identity by using a password, using a passphrase, or using another unique code such as a PIN or a personal identification number. Current industry practices, also known as password complexity, calls for using a password with a minimum length of 10 characters and at least 1 upper and 1 lowercase letter, 1 number, and 1 system acceptable special character, which of course requires systems to be case sensitive. Another alternative is using a passphrase, something like, "My favorite pizza is 1 thin crust pepperoni and pineapple from Pizza Hut," which would then translate to a passphrase you could remember. It's an easy phrase for you to remember, but not so much for hackers. One problem with complex passwords is that they may become too hard for you to remember, particularly since different systems you use require different policies in terms of when to change your password. How many passwords do you have? How do you remember them? What if you're hit by a bus? Can anyone get into your account? Why do you want such powerful passwords? If you look here, it's kind of like the security sign in your yard and or the dogs that bark at your house. You simply want the burglar to go elsewhere where it's easier. Same here. We want the hackers to find another target that's easier. Remember my last phrase? My favorite pizza is 1 thin crust pepperoni and pineapple from Pizza Hut. If you put it all together, it's 24 letters long. Even with no combination of upper and lower case, and this one actually might have 2 uppercase, and even with no numbers, this one has 8, and no special characters, this one has 3. The length alone is a deterrent to hackers and would take about 7,000 years to crack. This is using a standalone 2015 era PC. Adding the special characters, numbers, and upper and lowercase characters, you're looking at over 700 billion years to crack the password. Move on to someone else who has an easier password to crack. With access to supercomputers and or crowdsourced computing and with enough time, your password can be cracked, even 24 letters, combinations upper and lower. You want to make it as difficult as possible, however. Now let's look at something a person has. These could be smart cards or handheld tokens or cell phones, for instance. Here you see a picture of France's healthcare smart card. Does it look familiar? See the embedded chip? That's the way most credit card companies have recently been improving security. They add a CVV code on the back for online purchasing to ensure that you really have the card in your possession. The CVV code is the PIN that provides multi-factor authentication. So you have the card, something a person has, and you know something, the CVV or other type of PIN. You also might use a token, which is a handheld device that generates a number as shown here. You then enter the number to verify you have the token. Similarly, you may be asked to send a code to your cell phone, and then you enter the code to access the system. The organization you are trying to access wants to make sure you have the password and you have something else that is supposed to be in your possession, in this case, your cell phone. Finally, we have something a person can produce. Most of the technologies that scan human characteristics convert these images to obtain some form of minutia, unique points of reference that are digitized and stored in an encrypted format. Among all possible biometrics, only 3 human characteristics are usually considered truly unique: fingerprints, retina of the eye, which is they look at the blood vessel pattern, iris of the eye, which is a random pattern of features found in the iris, including freckles, pits, striations, vasculature, coronas, and crypts. You never knew the iris of your eye was so exciting. DNA or genetic authentication will be included in this category if it ever becomes a cost-effective and socially accepted and timely technology. Biometric technologies are based on their ability to provide access to authorized users, to deny access to unauthorized users, and to rarely make a mistake. If you have to continually try to get the system to recognize your iris scan, then it detracts from your time and your ability to get to the systems needed. Similarly, you don't want your sister to come in and be recognized as you through her retina scan. It's a balancing act, and one that InfoSec professionals must assess and evaluate regularly. To summarize, technical controls to access systems provide some protection to information assets. However, people need to be properly trained to reduce the chance of a breach in your InfoSec plan. Even with stringent access controls and authentication, if the user shares credentials, the technical control may be overcome. Successful access control mechanisms must identify the user, authenticate the identity, authorize access to approved units, and provide accountability to each person for his or her accesses. You must be able to connect the authorized user who accessed the system to a log of activities that can be reviewed as part of ongoing InfoSec management activities. You want to be able to identify irregularities. The 3 types of authentication include something a person knows, something a person has, or something a person can produce. Examples include a password, 2-factor identification using a number on your phone, and your fingerprint. The methods of authentication must maximize the ability of authorized users to get to the information they need while denying access to unauthorized users who should not be allowed into the system. We continue Chapter 12, Protection Mechanisms. This is Section 2, Selecting and Managing Firewalls. In this section, we will discuss the second learning outcome, identify the various types of firewalls and the common approaches to firewall implementation. Firewalls have been the first line of defense in network security for over 25 years. A firewall is a device that prevents a specific type of information from moving between the outside world, known as the untrusted network, like the internet, and the inside world, known as the trusted network. A firewall may be comprised of hardware, software, or more, or both. Types of firewalls include packet filtering firewalls, application layer proxy firewalls, stateful packet inspection firewalls, and unified threat management devices. As the name implies, packet filtering defines specific rule sets that only allow packets to advance if they are from a trusted source. These rule sets provide an efficient method of securing the information assets of the organization. With packet filtering, network access is controlled by monitoring outgoing and incoming packets. Data packets are filtered, and unrestricted data packets are passed on to the appropriate destination. However, blocked data packets are not allowed through the firewall. Source and destination internet protocol or IP addresses, other protocols, and ports are some of the sources of defined rules that allow or disallow packets to pass through. Here you see an example of a packet filtering rule set. Looking at the first source address, no matter what destination address is used or what service port it is from, the packets will not be allowed through the network. The source address listed has been determined to be untrusted and should not be allowed through under any circumstances. Other combinations of source, destination address, and service ports lead to denying or allowing the packets to move through the network. In the strictest sense, an application layer firewall or application level firewall works like a packet filtering firewall, but at the application level. An application layer proxy firewall understands the application it is protecting, so it is able to filter at the application level. It may do this by blocking disallowed commands such as macros, embedded files, or SQL. If a file is allowed through the firewall to the application level, the user will be warned that these commands may cause the file to be dangerous, adding another layer of security at the person level. Moreover, new threats to an application can be tackled by changes to the firewall's rule set so that dangerous files never reach the user. For data leaving the network, it can be analyzed for sensitivity and/or legal protections, thus intercepting any sensitive data prior to the user receiving it. Protection by firewall at the application level is quicker and easier than making changes to the application itself. A benefit with application layer proxy firewalls is that detailed knowledge of network traffic headers and payloads is logged and may provide better auditing. As an InfoSec professional, you want to have data logs so that you can track the onset of a problem down to the source of the problem. Here's a simple example. Say your school or workplace does not want you to use Facebook, an application. You make a request to access Facebook. The firewall sees that your request is for a block application, noted in its rules, and blocks your request. This is a very simple application layer proxy firewall, but you get the point. Stateful Packet Inspection, or SPI firewalls, keep track of each network connection established between internal and external systems using a state table. State tables track the state and context of each packet exchanged by recording which station sent what packet and when. An SPI firewall can restrict incoming packets by allowing access only to packets that constitute responses to requests from internal host. If the SPI firewall receives an incoming packet that it cannot match in its state table, then it defaults to performing traditional packet filtering against its rule base, and if the packet is allowed and becomes a conversation, the SPI firewall updates its state table with the information. Unified Threat Management, or UTM devices, are categorized by their ability to perform the work of a stateful packet inspection firewall, network intrusion detection and prevention system, content filter, and spam filter, as well as a malware scanner and filter. With a proper configuration, these devices are even able to drill down into the protocol layers and examine application-specific data, encrypted, compressed, and/or encoded data, commonly referred to as Deep Packet Inspection, or DPI. Here you see a basic example of a unified threat management device, which serves as a firewall, antivirus, anti-spam, content filter, intrusion prevention, and monitoring and reporting. Each of the firewall generations can be implemented in a number of architectural configurations. Several architectural implementations of firewalls are especially common: single bastion host architecture, screened host firewalls, and screened subnet firewalls. Most organizations with an internet connection use some form of device between their internal networks and the external service provider. In the single bastion host architecture, a single device configured to filter packets serves as a sole security point between the two networks and unfortunately represents a rich target for external attacks. The bastion host is usually implemented as a dual-homed host, as it contains two network interfaces, one that is connected to the external network and one that is connected to the internal network. Here you see a configuration of a dual-homed host that is used as a firewall and provides network address translation. Let's look at how IP addresses are used with firewalls. Network address translation, NAT, is a method of converting multiple real routable external IP addresses to specific ranges of internal IP addresses, usually on a one-to-one basis. Port address translation, PAT, not like in football, converts a single real valid external IP address to special ranges of internal IP addresses. That is a one-to-many approach by adding a unique port number. Both use special non-routable addresses consisting of three different ranges. 10.x.x.x range, and there are more than 16.5 million usable addresses with those. 192.168.x.x range with more than 65,000 addresses. 172.16.0.0 through 172.16.15.0 range, and here you have approximately 4,000 addresses. Screened host firewall systems combine the packet filtering router with a separate dedicated firewall, such as an application proxy server or proxy firewall. This approach allows the router to screen packets to minimize the network traffic load and load on the internal proxy, while the proxy examines an application layer protocol such as HTTP and performs the proxy services. When evaluating a firewall, you should ask the following questions. What type of firewall technology offers the right balance between protection and cost for the needs of the organization? What features are included in the base price? What features are available at additional cost? Are all cost factors even known? How easy is it to set up and configure the firewall? How accessible are the staff technicians who can competently configure the firewall? And can the candidate firewall adapt to the growing network and the target organization? Let's look at some of the challenges of using firewalls. Any firewall device, whether a packet filtering router, bastion host, or other firewall implementation, must have its own configuration rules that regulate its actions. A policy regarding the use of a firewall should be articulated before it is made operable. So before you plan and buy the necessary equipment for your firewall, set up the policies regarding how the firewall will be used. In practice, configuring firewall rule sets can be something of a nightmare. Each firewall rule must be carefully crafted, placed into the list in the proper sequence, debugged, and tested. Get the right technical skills and business-savvy people to write the rules that work for your organization. Firewalls are limited by the constraints of their program and rule sets in the following ways. They're not creative and don't understand human actions that are outside of their programmed responses. Firewalls deal strictly with defined patterns of measured observation. These patterns are known to possible attackers and can be used to their benefit in an attack. Firewalls are computers themselves and are thus subject to programming errors, flaws in rule sets, and inherent vulnerabilities. Firewalls are designed to function within limits of hardware capacity and thus can only respond to patterns of events that happen in an expected and reasonably simultaneous sequence. Finally, firewalls are designed, implemented, configured, and operated by people and are subject to the expected series of mistakes from human error. We all make mistakes. If we think we don't make mistakes, then we haven't looked hard enough. There are also a number of administrative challenges to the operation of firewalls. Training. Most managers think of a firewall as just another device, more or less similar to the computers already humming in the rack. 2, uniqueness. Each brand of firewall is different, and the new e-commerce project just brought you a new firewall running on a different operating system. Responsibility. Since you are the firewall person, suddenly everyone assumes that anything to do with computer security is your responsibility. And finally, 4, administration. Being a firewall administrator for a medium or large organization should be a full-time job. However, as you might imagine, that's hardly ever the case. Some of the best practices for firewall use include all traffic from the trusted network is allowed out. So you'll allow it out if it's from a trusted network. The firewall device is never accessible directly from the public network. You want to have a buffer between. Simple mail transport protocol data is allowed to pass through the firewall, but should be routed to a well-configured SMTP or simple mail transport protocol gateway, also called a proxy server. All Internet Control Message Protocol, ICMP, data should be denied. Telnet terminal emulation access to all internal servers from public networks should be blocked. When web services are offered outside the firewall, HTTP traffic should be handled by some form of proxy access or DMZ architecture, demilitarized zone. In summary, firewalls are one of the most common methods of protecting your information assets from those who want to do harm to them. Firewalls should be installed with clear rules, policies, and guidelines prior to implementation. And each type of firewall has advantages and disadvantages. Select the option that best matches with organizational needs and information security staffing. We continue Chapter 12. Section 3 is Intrusion Detection and Prevention Systems. This section will cover the third learning outcome. Identify and describe the types of intrusion detection and prevention systems and the strategies on which they are based. An intrusion detection and prevention system combines the capabilities of intrusion detection with the ability to react to the detection or prevention. When an intrusion detection and prevention system detects a violation, it can activate an alarm, it can send a message to a monitoring entity, or it may simply log the activity. You tell it what it needs to do. Systems that include intrusion detection and prevention technology attempt to prevent the attack from succeeding by stopping the attack by terminating the network connection or the session, changing the security environment by reconfiguring network devices to block access to the targeted system, and/or changing the attack's content to make it benign, like malware. Here you see an example of how an intrusion detection and prevention system works. The IDPS examines data and looks for unusual changes. Something is wrong with the packets and/or the patterns found. Thus, administrators will be alerted. A signature-based IDPS or knowledge-based IDPS examines data traffic for something that matches the signatures, which comprise pre-configured, predetermined attack patterns. It knows how past attacks occurred because the people told it, and it predicts future patterns from that. The problem with this approach is that the signatures must be continually updated as new strategies emerge. The bad guys also know the patterns and try to make them unrecognizable. Another weakness of this method is the time frame over which attacks occur. If attackers are slow and methodical, they may slip undetected through the IDPS, as their actions may not match a signature that includes factors based on duration of the events. These slow attacks may occur over days or weeks as the attackers learn about the system and where vulnerabilities may exist. The anomaly-based IDPS or behavior-based IDPS first collects data from normal traffic and establishes a baseline. It then periodically samples network activity and compares the samples to the baseline. When the activity falls outside the baseline parameters or clipping level, the IDPS notifies the administrator. The advantage of this approach is that the system is able to detect new types of attacks as it looks for any type of abnormal or unusual activity. Unfortunately, these IDPS systems require significant processing capability as they must constantly attempt to match activity to the baseline. In addition, they may not detect minor changes to system variables and may generate many false positive warnings. Just as with any alarm system, if there is no response to an alert, then alarm does no good. IDPSs must be configured using technical knowledge and adequate business and security knowledge to differentiate between routine circumstances and low, moderate, or severe threats. You gotta have well-trained, technically competent, business-savvy information security professionals to make this happen. A properly configured IDPS can translate a security alert into different types of notification to ensure that management is aware of the threat. A poorly configured IDPS, on the other hand, may yield only noise. You may think everything is okay, and it may not be. Here you see a simplified passive network-based IDPS sensor architecture example. Multiple firewall and IDPS configurations help to protect your organization's information assets. To summarize, intrusion detection and prevention systems are one tool that information security managers should know how to use. There are multiple configurations for intrusion detection and prevention systems. Choose the one that is right for your organization. The best intrusion detection and prevention system is no good if InfoSec managers fail to use the information provided. A bad IDPS presents so many false positives that InfoSec managers stop listening. Find a balance between the two and choose what works to protect the information assets in your organization. We continue Chapter 12, Protection Mechanisms. This is Section 4, Remote Access Control. This section will discuss the last learning outcome, explain cryptography and the encryption process, and compare and contrast symmetric and asymmetric encryption. Let's talk a little about wireless networks, most of which are based on IEEE 802-11. The two most common wireless network encryption types are Wired Equivalent Privacy, or WEP. This provides a basic level of security to prevent unauthorized access or eavesdropping, but does not protect users from observing each other's data. It has fundamental cryptological flaws resulting in vulnerabilities that can be exploited. And Wi-Fi protected access. This is the industry standard for improved Wi-Fi security. WPA2 introduced newer, more robust security protocols based on the advanced encryption standard. Advantages of both include they provide increased capabilities for authentication, encryption, and throughput, although they do have some compatibility issues with older WAPs and network cards, and they can use an IEEE.802.1x authentication server to be compatible with newer versions. Bluetooth is a de facto industry standard for short range, about 15 to 30 feet, wireless communications between devices. We all have a Bluetooth device, don't we? A Bluetooth headset or a hands-free phone in our car. They're convenient, portable, and inexpensive. In discoverable mode, devices can easily be accessed, and even in non-discoverable mode, the device is susceptible to access by other devices that have connected with it in the past. The only way to secure Bluetooth-enabled devices is to turn off Bluetooth when you do not intend to use it and do not accept an incoming communications pairing request unless you know who the requester is. Conscientious administrators will have several informational websites bookmarked, and they frequently browse for new vulnerabilities, recent conquest, and favorite assault techniques. In addition, scanning and analysis tools can find vulnerabilities in systems, holes in security components, and other unsecured aspects of the network. Footprinting is the organized research of internet addresses owned or controlled by a target organization, whereas fingerprinting entails the systematic examination of all of the organization's network addresses and yields a detailed network analysis that reveals useful information about planned targets. Yes, they are all out to get you. Make that assumption and protect your information assets as good as you can. Port scanners are applications that can identify or fingerprint computers active on a network, as well as their active ports and services and other useful information. Open ports can be used to send commands to a computer, gain access to a server, and exert control over a networking device, and thus must be secured. Vulnerability scanners, which are variants of port scanners, are capable of scanning networks for very detailed information. They identify exposed usernames and groups, show open network shares, and expose configuration problems and other server vulnerabilities. Here you see some of the more commonly used port numbers, for instance 20 and 21 for File Transfer Protocol, or FTP. Domain names, number resources, and protocol assignments are managed by IANA, which is the Internet Assigned Numbers Authority. A packet sniffer is a network tool that collects and analyzes packers on a network. It can be used to eavesdrop on network traffic. A packet sniffer must be connected directly by a local network from an internal location. To use a packet sniffer legally, you must be on a network that the organization owns, not one it leases, be under the direct authorization of the network owners, have the knowledge and consent of the users, and have a justifiable business reason for doing so. There are some drawbacks to using scanners and analysis tools. These tools, like we talked about with firewalls, are not human and thus cannot simulate the more creative behavior of a human attacker. Most tools function by pattern recognition, so only previously known issues can be detected. Most of these tools are computer-based software or hardware, and so are prone to errors, flaws, and vulnerabilities of their own. All of these tools are designed, configured, and operated by humans and are subject to human errors. You get what you pay for. Use of hackerware may actually infect a system with a virus or open the system to outside attacks or other unintended consequences. Specifically for content filters, some organizations have established policies or laws that protect the individual user's right to access content, especially if it is necessary for the conduct of his or her job. Finally, tool usage and configuration must comply with an explicitly articulated policy, and the policy must provide for valid exceptions. In summary, wireless networking and Bluetooth offer ease of accessibility, but do come with security drawbacks and must be properly managed as part of an overall information security plan. Scanning and analysis tools and port analysis allow hackers to learn a great deal about your network and allow you to learn a great deal about your network as well. Plan for hackers and hope to be proven wrong. Packet sniffers can be used to eavesdrop on local traffic and can only be used legally in limited instances. Just don't use them. Scanning and analysis tools are only as good as their human designers, just like any technical control or technology product. We finished Chapter 12, Protection Mechanisms. This is Section 5, Logs and Cryptography. This section will discuss the following learning outcome: explain cryptography and the encryption process, and compare and contrast symmetric and asymmetric encryption. Let's look at managing server-based systems with logging. Log data is commonly used to audit system performance and usage by both authorized and unauthorized users. Some systems are configured to record a common set of data by default. Other systems must be configured to be activated. To protect the log data, you must ensure that the servers that create and store the logs are secure. According to NIST, log infrastructure involves two tiers, each with its own subtask: log generation and log analysis and storage. Log analysis and storage is the transference of the log data to an analysis system, which may or may not be separate from the system that collects the log data, for the purpose of interpreting, filtering, correlating, analyzing, storage, and/or reporting the data. Important management functions within log storage include log rotation, archival, compression, reduction, conversion, normalization, and file integrity. Important management functions within log analysis include event correlation, log viewing, and log reporting. General suggestions for managing logs include: make sure the data stores can handle the amount of data generated by the configured logging activities. Rotate logs when unlimited data storage is not possible. Archive, secure, and destroy logs. Encryption is the process of converting an original message into a form that cannot be understood by unauthorized individuals. Cryptology, the science of encryption, encompasses two disciplines: cryptography and cryptanalysis. Cryptography describes the processes involved in encoding and decoding messages so that others cannot understand them. And cryptanalysis is the process of deciphering the original message or plain text from an encrypted message or ciphertext without knowing the algorithms and keys used to perform the encryption. Here are a few terms associated with encryption that we will discuss further: algorithm, cipher, ciphertext or cryptogram, cryptosystem, decipher, decrypt, encipher, encrypt, key, key space, plain text, steganography, work factor, and we will define most of them in this section. In encryption, the most commonly used algorithms include substitution cipher. With this method, you simply substitute one value for another. A monoalphabetic substitution uses only one alphabet, while a polyalphabetic solution uses two or more alphabets. For instance, A equals C and D equals X and so forth would be a very simple substitution cipher. Transposition cipher or permutation cipher simply rearranges the values within a block to create the ciphertext. This can be done at the bit level or at the byte character level. For instance, Word becomes ROWD as a very simple example. With the XOR cipher conversion, the bit stream is subjected to a Boolean XOR function against some other data stream, typically a key stream. XOR works simply. If the two values are the same, you get 0. If not, you get 1, and the process is reversible. For instance, 12, 11, 64, 58, 99, and then compared with 12, 10, 52, 76, 99 would be 1, since the 12s are equal, 0, 0, 0, since the next three numbers are not equal, and then 1 for the 99s being equal. Let's look at an example of symmetric encryption. Rachel at ABC Corporation generates a secret key which she wants to send to Alex so that their communications are private and secret. Once Alex has the secret key, Rachel has the ability to encrypt messages, and Alex can use the key to decrypt and read the encrypted messages. With asymmetric public key encryption is another option. With this method of encryption, Alex wants to send a message to Rachel. Rachel stores her public key where it can be accessed by anyone. Alex goes out and retrieves the public key and uses it to create ciphertext that can only be decrypted by Rachel's private key, which she keeps secret. To respond, Rachel gets Alex's public key to encrypt her messages. When the asymmetric process is reversed, that is, the private key encrypts the message and the public key decrypts it, the fact that the message was sent by the organization that owns the private key cannot be refuted. This is called non-repudiation. Digital signatures are an example of an encrypted message that is independently verified by a central facility, like registry, as being authentic. A digital signature is an electronic document, similar to a digital signature, attached to a file certifying that the file is from the organization it claims to be from and has not been modified from the original format. Finally, a certificate authority, or CA, is an agency that manages the issuance of certificate and serves as the electronic notary public, so to speak, to verify their origin and integrity. In most cases, digital signatures carry the same authority as written signatures and are required by law to be recognized as such. Public key infrastructure, PKI, is the entire set of hardware, software, and cryptosystems necessary to implement public key encryption. PKI systems are based on public key cryptosystems and include digital certificates and certificate authorities. Common implementations of PKI include systems that issue digital certificates to users and servers, systems with computer key values to be included in digital certificates, tools for managing user enrollment, key generation, and certificate issuance, verification and return of certificates, key revocation services, and other services associated with PKI that vendors bundle into their products. Now let's look at hybrid encryption. Rachel at ABC Corp stores her public key where it can be accessed. Alex at XYZ Corp retrieves it and uses it to encrypt his private symmetric key. He sends it to Rachel, who decrypts Alex's private key with her private key and then uses Alex's private key for regular communication. As an InfoSec professional, you want to integrate security throughout your network. For instance, for email security, you may use secure multipurpose internet mail extensions, SMIME, or pretty good privacy, PGP, among other choices. For web security, you might use Secure Sockets Layer, SSL, the little lock you see at the top of a secure e-commerce site, for instance, Secure Hypertext Transfer Protocol, or SHTTP, Secure Shell, SSH, you might use for transferring files, and Internet Protocol Security, or IPSEC. In summary, we reached the last chapter in the book, and we talked about the following key points in this last section. Managing public and private keys is important for securing the information assets of the organization. Cryptography helps us better understand who we are communicating with. We should only give access to those with a business need to know. Every crypto system has weaknesses, and security protocols and crypto systems are only as good as their human developers and installers. InfoSec professionals must know how to recognize and overcome the inherent weaknesses present. There is no security in obscurity. Stay current, attend trade shows, competitions, and conferences, and keep up with the latest exploits and vulnerabilities online. Security protocols and crypto systems are only as good as their human developers and installers. Your organization's use of cryptography should be based on well-constructed policy and sound management procedures.